when are we going to see that biometric exit?
So we prototyped it most recently at Atlanta Airport. It's worked very well, and we're partnering very closely with Customs to put together an implementation timeline for when that can be put in place.
So you take a minute and just tell us how that works.
What it does is when a passenger comes into the United States internationally, their image is taken at Customs when they go through the port of entry in the airport. And what Customs does is they match that up with their passport photo to make sure that they're the same person. And of course, we do all the background checks and things like that to admit into the country. When they exit the country, there's a requirement, not yet fully implemented, to biometrically exit. So you biometrically enter, and then you will be biometrically exited from.
And as they've landed in Dulles and leave Atlanta, it still works?
It still works, yes, sir.
Is that the same thing in Minnesota that's happening, or is that different?
That's different. In Minnesota, that's mostly for domestic travel. Okay. And we are putting biometrics in extensively, facial recognition. And I should mention, too, that...
I think you should wait a long time for Minnesota.
But we've been working really, really closely with Customs so that we aren't duplicating effort. We're using the same technology, and so far it's worked very well.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, start my clock now. Let me ask you this, Mr. Administrator. 20 years ago, Congress chose not to place the new agency under Title V. We now have a proposal, a FY 2023 proposal, that would essentially do that. An additional $121 million is requested to establish a labor relations support capability to manage expanded labor benefits for TSA officers. A panel that you appointed, a blue ribbon panel composed of Republicans and Democrats, in 2019 recommended against that, including the Chief Human Capital Officer for DHS under President Obama, strongly recommended against moving TSA personnel under Title V. And they said this: one recommendation the panel heard repeatedly from employees was moving TSA into the general schedule. The panel does not agree. The general schedule is a 70-year-old classification and compensation system for the last century and is the subject of countless studies and recommendations from good government organizations who consistently find it is too inflexible to meet the needs of 21st century workforce. A better course of action is to use existing ATSA flexibility to improve TSA pay system so that it operates at a level superior to the GS system. So where are we on that? And has there been, have you had a change of heart? And is there some middle ground where we can pay these people what they're due without moving to the GS?
Thank you, sir. The President's budget request seeks the funding to support pay that's equitable, that's equivalent to what someone would be paid under the general schedule. It also has a separate budget line item to support full collective bargaining, because we cannot implement full collective bargaining. We do limited collective bargaining for our TSOs. We're funded for that. We aren't funded for full collective bargaining. So there's two separate line items, one for pay, one for collective bargaining. The pay item does not require a transfer to Title V. It doesn't say which system to operate under, it just says we need the pay. From my perspective, 5 years in TSA, talking to thousands of officers, the number one concern they have is their pay. When they're working in an airport and they see their Customs and Border Protection counterparts who are on the general schedule making a lot more money than they do, doing somewhat similar but different jobs, but they would classify out very, very similar to each other, that's a significant problem. And we have high levels of attrition in TSA. 20% of our workforce turns over every year. And it's very, very hard for us to recruit people because they're looking at the pay system. And even if we can recruit them, they'll decide to come into TSA sometimes and then transition to another agency.
Is more of it moving to another agency or moving to the private sector, sir?
It's both, sir. But some folks that come in do want to work in the federal government, do want to serve their country, do want the benefits the federal government provides. But they're looking, of course, for where they can get the best compensation package.
What's the entry level?
The entry level for us is roughly the GS5 level. Yeah. And so when you think about it, the TSOs that you see in checkpoints, their average pay is around $40,000 a year. That's a very low level of pay for the responsibility that we place on their shoulders and what we ask of them day in and day out. So for me, the number one thing for me as the administrator, and if confirmed into the next 5 years, is fixing this pay issue, because it's critical for us. You both mentioned staffing of the airports. We won't be able to staff if we don't get pay adjusted.
Thank you, sir. I yield back.
Very good, thank you. Senator Tester.